This is Four Roses Single Barrel. The history of Four Roses is freaking crazy. Let's start with the name. Like, this name, Four Roses, all comes down to a woman playing games. Apparently the founder of Four Roses, Paul Jones, had a thing for a Southern Belle. Just picture Scarlett from Gone with the Wind if you want a visual reference.
Great balls of fire, don't bother me anymore, and don't call me sugar.
Now, he supposedly sent her one of these fourth grade style, I like you, do you like me, check yes or no kind of letters. So apparently Paul had some game. And instead of just being transparent and checking yes or no, she said, I'm gonna be at the dance tonight. And if I'm wearing roses, it's a yes. And if I'm not, go away. Seriously, I like you, you like me. Let's hang out. Like, keep this simple. Why we gotta send smoke signals or something? I don't know. But apparently the answer was a yes, because at the dance, she was wearing a corsage of 4 red roses. Good for Paul. Although, I couldn't find any mention of did they get married? What is this Southern Belle's name? So I'm assuming it didn't work out long term. So, sorry, Paul. It appears the Four Roses made an impression on old Paul, and he decided to use it when he created a whiskey brand. But then there's the fact that all of that may be a complete and total fabrication.
The lie detector determined that was a lie.
Like, that's the official story, or at least kind of close to the official story from the brand themselves. But there's also a story that someone with the last name Rose and their brother and their 2 kids might have been the Four Roses and founded it. I don't know, it wasn't there. Regardless, it's been around for a long time, and it's had a history that's seen it go from one of the most popular whiskeys in the US to not being sold in the US to back to what it is today. In 1922, old Paul Jones bought the Frankfurt Distilling Company and grew the Four Roses brand into one of the most popular bourbons in the United States. The brand was then sold to Seagram's in 1943. And after the US market started really favoring lighter spirits, they decided to focus their inventory on the European and Asian markets, where the whiskey is still fairly popular. In 1992, a Kentucky man named Jim Rutledge, who had been working with Seagram's since 1966, asked if he could return home and resurrect the Four Roses brand that he loved so much. And they agreed. So in 1995, Jim became the master distiller at Four Roses. In 2002, Kieran purchased the Four Roses brand from Seagram's and became the Four Roses Distillery. From there, it wasn't long before the company, with Jim's help, brought Four Roses all the way back in the United States. What I have here is Four Roses Single Barrel. And this clocks in at 100 proof, and it uses Four Roses OBSV mash bill, which is 60% corn, 35% rye, and 5% malted barley. And Four Roses has different yeast strains they use in conjunction with different mash bills to produce different products. This one uses yeast strain V, which supposedly produces flavors of delicate fruit. But let's see what the bottle tells us. On the front, Four Roses Single Barrel, Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Distilled and aged by Four Roses Distillery, LLC, Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. We also have the warehouse and barrel numbers here at the bottom. On the back, it just says Four Roses Single Barrel, and it has a whole bunch of warnings that tell me the government doesn't want you to drink this, and you should never carry it into the state of California, probably, if I were to actually read such nonsense. Now, the bottle on this is fantastic, very distinctive, iconic. You could pick this out of a crowd really easily, and it has this awesome kind of embossed Four Roses logo here on the front. And there's not a ton of marketing BS on here. Obviously a couple of buzz terms. I mean, it's a single barrel, things like that, but overall, they're just gonna let the whiskey speak for itself. Let's check out the distiller's notes. Nose, dried spice, pear, cocoa, vanilla, and maple syrup. Taste, hints of ripe plum and cherries, robust, full body, mellow. Finish, smooth and delicately long. Sounds pretty dang good, like they're selling that. They don't have to go over the top with marketing hype, just those tasting notes make it sound fantastic. And as I mentioned, we're gonna judge this on 6 different criteria, but before we do that, it always helps me if you'll hit the like button on this video, maybe consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. We're also doing a ton of reviews and trying to take this channel up to the next level, so your support in places like Patreon or channel memberships here on YouTube really help us do that. If you wanna know more about that, you can always check out the links in the description. We also have the best merch in the whiskey tuber game. If I'm just being unbiased and honest, this horse collector shirt's fantastic. The Bourbon Hunter shirts. Just go check out the shirts at Brewzle.com. If you don't like them, if they're not the best designs in the bourbon merch game, you let me know who's better. And if they are, maybe buy one. Maybe buy 3. I don't know. All right, that's enough talking. Let's get into the drinking. This is my blind review of Four Roses Single Barrel. And the first criteria is aroma/taste. And the aroma/taste is 50% of the overall Brewzle score. That has a nice, pleasant, kind of bright, fruity sweetness. Really what I'm looking for in a nose on a bourbon. Like, this is right up my alley. Man, if I could make a bourbon that good, I'd be good to go, at least one that smells that good. Wow, okay. It delivers on a lot of that kind of bright fruitiness. It has a little bit of proof on it. I'm gonna say it's above 100 proof. So I like bottles at 107. You know, that's kind of 100 to 107 is where I drink a lot of whiskey, and that's probably where I would put this one. Could be just a touch over that. Like, it's definitely got a nice warming sweetness to it. So overall in the flavors, I think this is probably a 70. Now, you may not like that bright fruity sweetness, but I tend to reward that on whiskeys. And the next criteria is complexity. And again, this is 0 through 100, and this is gonna be 20% of the overall Brewzle score. And what I'm looking for on complexity, how does it evolve as you're trying the whiskey? Like, does it give you a lot of different flavors? So if you're trying like a Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, like those are just so, the flavors are so deep and there's so much going on, it's hard to pick it all up. Like, it's really overwhelming. And that's what we're looking for with complexity. And this one has some complexity. It has that nice kind of oaky, sweet fruitiness at the front, and then the oakiness starts to dissipate and it's just kind of fruit through the mid palate, and it gives me a nice kind of red fruit, like cherry note on the finish. Overall, I think the complexity is pretty good. It's not like super exceptional. There's not like 8,000 little nuanced things I'm trying to pick up in there. So overall, I would put that as a 65. And the next criteria is finish. What does it leave you with when everything's said and done and you're finished drinking the whiskey? It seems like a lot lower proof now. The more I'm drinking it, the more that proof seems to be low. It might have been just because the sample we had before, the last thing we reviewed, like I just finished tasting Jack Daniel's number 7. This one seems to be higher proof than that, and it's starting to get softer and a little more well-rounded. And so I think I might have been fooled into thinking it was a higher proof. I still think it's 100 proof plus, but maybe not as much as I'd originally thought, because I'm not getting a ton of burn on the finish. I'm getting, you know, some nice soft flavors, but nothing that just blows me away. So on the finish, I'm going to give it a 60. And the next criteria is mouthfeel. How thick and viscous is the whiskey? Then this one has a nice, soft, velvety texture to it. It's not just blowing me away, but it is definitely well above average. Yeah, that mouthfeel is nice and solid, so I'm going to give it a 70. And then our last two criteria are around availability and value, and each of those are going to be 5%. That way, if two whiskeys are even, the more available one is going to rank higher because everybody can enjoy it. So I need to know what the whiskey is to be able to judge these. So I'm gonna open my note card here and see what we've been tasting, even though y'all already know. And this one is Four Roses Single Barrel, which is a really good whiskey. And I think, now knowing what this is, I don't think I would judge this any differently. I mean, if it was a Four Roses Single Barrel strength, that would have ranked higher. But as far as availability goes, Four Roses Single Barrel seems to be fairly widely available. It's not necessarily like a limited release they do once a year or something like that, but it's also not in every store I go into everywhere. So it's not gonna be 100 like Jack Daniel's, but I think also it's probably not a 60 like the 1792 Full Proof that is a limited release. And so with that, we're gonna put it probably around a 75. And that means basically you can get one if you want one. And you don't have to put a ton of effort, you don't have to pay a secondary markup. Like, you're gonna be able to go into a store, you might have to try a few stores, but you can find one. And y'all let me know if y'all disagree with that, right? Like, I'm not hunting for Four Roses Single Barrel, so I haven't really spied on every store to see how available they are, but I see them with fair regularity, and every time I've ever needed one, I found one within a few days of hunting. And so the next criteria is value. All right, so after a little Googling, it looks like the MSRP of Four Roses Single Barrel is $40 to $45-ish. I mean, something that's a 70 on the flavor scale with $40 to $45-ish overall, I think that's a pretty solid value. Like, this is a really good bourbon for under 50 bucks. And these days, every craft distiller everywhere is selling their crap for 60 bucks. And so the fact that you could get something from a major distiller that is this freaking good is gonna make the value exceptional. And so I'm gonna put the value at 75. And that gets Four Roses single barrel a Brewzle score of 68.5, which puts it right up above the 1792 foolproof and is our highest rated one so far with this new scale. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, is that where you think Four Roses single barrel should be? Now, a lot of folks are like, if it's 70, I don't want it, right? It's like homework. If I had a 70, that's a C, that's not good. A 68, oh my God, you've got a D, that's not good. That's not how our scale works. 50 is average, anything above 50 is going to be an above average whiskey. And I would say once we get to like 75, we start talking about exceptional whiskeys, either something that's really good that's not readily available, or we start talking about something that is really good and is available that gets a little bit of a bump. So this one being a solid whiskey, I think 68.5 is pretty good on that one. It's our highest rated one so far. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.